Hello, my name is Jeremy Siegrist, and today this short presentation is on the subject of effortful retrieval. Throughout this presentation, we will discuss what standard study practices are currently, what effortful retrieval is, and how it aids in long-term recall. Finally, I will provide some simple suggestions for implementing this technique into your curriculum or training designs. Our learning objectives today are that upon completion of this presentation, viewers will be able to identify what effortful retrieval is and what it looks like. Additionally, viewers will also be able to state how the process of effortful retrieval works in conjunction with the brain to help encode memories into long-term storage. Finally, viewers will know how to apply the process of effortful retrieval inside the design of an online curriculum or training course. Now we are going to talk about the two most popular ways to study and learn new material: massed practice and repeated exposure, and if there is any supporting evidence for these methods. Many people believe that these techniques work. Unfortunately, the evidence that this style of studying aids in real learning or long-term recall is not very compelling. Additionally, we will discuss what is actually happening when these techniques are employed. Learning is mostly a natural process. However, as we enter our school years and eventually into higher education, a skilled trade, or the workforce, inevitably we must take the step to commit essential ideas and concepts to memory. Over time then, as our study habits develop, we tend to go back repeatedly to the techniques in which we believe we can find success. By consequence, many students and learners come to firmly rely on massed practice and re-exposure retrieval techniques. And like Brown, Roediger, and McDaniel note in the opening lines to their book, Make It Stick: The Science of Successful Learning, this is the wrong way to learn. The reliance on these study habits is not without reason, even if it is a bit misguided. Many people experience quick, short-term gains immediately after using these styles of retrieval. You may know one of the styles of retrieval as it is more commonly known as cramming. As Endel Tolving, a researcher from the University of Toronto, showed in his 1967 study on the effects of free recall, massed practice may lead to a quick boost of information which is easily repeated, but it quickly wears off as no information has entered into long-term memory. Through years of both using and being taught these study practices, the idea of repeated exposure and simple, quick retrieval practice has become very pervasive. Major universities even recommend this style of retrieval as a preferred method of study. It should come as no surprise then, in one study of college students, conducted by J.P. Karpik, A.C. Butler, and H.L. Roediger, a majority of students were found to depend primarily on re-exposure as their primary means of study. As we can see, much of what we believe about the best ways to study and the process by which we commit things to long-term memory have never been based on substantial scientific evidence and verified results. This is not new news to the scientific community, as it has been known for years that immediate recitation and long-term learning are very different. This is what researchers R.A. Bjork and E.L. Bjork called retrieval strength or immediate recitation, and storage strength or long-term recall. Fortunately, however, like Brown, Roediger, and McDaniel note, there are more than 125 years of study on learning and memory. What this accumulated research shows is that the best learning practices and techniques for genuinely committing something to memory are somewhat, if not totally, counterintuitive. Research conducted by Endel Tolving at the University of Toronto as far back as the 1960s proved empirically that there was almost no statistical difference between groups who used repeated exposure and multiple reading methods and those who did not. What this means in layman's terms is that simply repeating things over and over does not necessarily result in concrete learning or learning entering into the long-term memory. So why do people still use these study techniques? Unfortunately, as Dr. Thomas Gilovich pointed out in his research, humans are prone to all manner of ideas and beliefs which we believe to be reality, when it's not. Massed practice and repetition alone send all new information into the short-term memory, allowing for the appearance of memorization and the feeling of mastering the content. It is this appearance of real learning and the illusion of mastery which makes this style of study so inviting. The idea that given enough repetition, any piece of information will eventually pass into long-term memory is not in question. What is being questioned, however, is how we conduct the retrieval. Rather than rapid repetition and simply re-exposing yourself over and over to the same material, the practice of effortful retrieval is a far more efficient and purposeful way to create long-term retention. Bearing all of this in mind, we will now first briefly discuss how memories are made inside the brain. Additionally, we will talk about the process of interrupting the act of forgetting and why it is crucial. Using this information, we will show why effortful retrieval is a preferred method of study, and finally, how using space between study sessions, along with the practice of interleaving, can work to enhance the design of any curriculum or training. In our brain, from the point of initial stimulus, we transform external input through a series of chemical and electrical processes, encoding the information into a distinct mental engram called a memory trace. At their inception, these memory traces are fleeting and mutable, strengthening over hours or days through an organizing and reordering process called consolidation. This is where new information is rehearsed, given special meaning, or connected to previously known information or experiences, allowing it to be transferred to long-term memory. Unfortunately for all of us, it is not long before we forget the vast majority of what we read or learn. Forgetting curves, or the amount of time it takes to forget, has been studied and analyzed since 1885. It was this long ago that Hermann Ebbinghaus determined that much of any new information is quickly lost to us after learning it, and if not maintained, completely drifts away. So the course of action for us as designers is clear. How do we aid in the interrupting of the forgetting curve? Through our course or training design. Fortunately, we know the answer is to keep bringing the information back from storage again and again. Known as the testing effect or the retrieval practice effect, retrieval practice makes information easier to recall and learning more permanent and lasting. Incorporating this in particular ways is vital to ensuring new learning is transferred into long-term memory and not lost by the act of forgetting. Although retrieval practice and the testing effect in themselves seem to be a perfectly reasonable solution to studying, the truth is most students and learners either do not use it or do not know they should be using it. A recent study found that only 11% of students used this method, and most of them were only using it to find deficient areas in their learning, not as a means to reinforce retention. There is a catch, however, because effortful retrieval is more nuanced than it sounds. Simply repeating things over and over does not aid retention in any way. Simple repetition, it seems, whether through rereading or massed practice, does not enhance long-term memory. Most importantly, it is the effort, even when it results in failure, which creates an opportunity for the brain to begin the encoding and reorganizing material into long-term memory. For retrieval practice to be truly useful, the act itself must contain effort. A typical learning misconception is that as retrieval becomes more comfortable, our learning occurs in equal measure. This could not be farther from the truth. In fact, the opposite is true to a point, and as effort increases, memories and knowledge are solidified, allowing more significant learning to take place. The increased effort found during effortful retrieval is known and considered as a desirable difficulty. This experience during effortful retrieval has the effect of actually entrenching information deeper into the brain, starting the encoding and consolidation processes over, and strengthening both learning and retention. Great care has to be taken, however, that the learner or student has the ability and the knowledge to be retrieved. Otherwise, the desirable difficulty becomes undesirable and a block to any further learning occurs. Knowing that increasing effort is the goal during retrieval, perhaps the most essential part of making retrieval effortful is merely spreading out the time between study sessions. Termed spaced practice, time spent between sessions to forget slightly increases the effort required to recall information, triggering the consolidation process again, connecting meaning, and strengthening the learning, allowing it to encode into the long-term memory. Once an appropriate amount of time has elapsed, whatever that may be, there are several strategies we can employ to practice effortful retrieval. Whether through self-administration, by the guiding hand of an instructor, or by a designer, self-testing allows the information to be recalled at varying levels of effort at different times. Additionally, research has shown that multiple testing sessions are more beneficial, especially when they are spaced appropriately far enough apart to make sure there is real effort in practice. In conjunction with self-testing, the mixing of question types, called interleaving, is a vital tool for increasing the effort required to retrieve knowledge. Although unpopular due to having the effect of slowing apparent learning, interleaving has the effect of strengthening long-term retention. Using this technique in conjunction with other effort-building strategies does appear to have a compounding effect on the learner, which cannot be ignored in any curriculum or course design. All of these techniques and efforts are designed for only one thing, and that is to reinforce long-term recall and allow us to access the great storehouse of memory we have inside our brain. When you practice retrieval, the more effort it takes to obtain a correct answer, the more the benefits of learning are evidenced. Now let's talk about 3 easy ways to add retrieval techniques to your course curriculum or training design. Although these ideas for implementation are not all-comprehensive or all-inclusive, they demonstrate how quickly retrieval practice can be implemented and made effortful. Flashcards, although a staple in our lives from the time we enter the educational system until the time we leave, they can be implemented incredibly well into a course or distance learning design. In many cases, the flashcards themselves can be provided by the designer for the student or learner to print or copy. When used to reinforce deficient areas, they can be an excellent retrieval tool to implement into a design. Although many students and learners are used to and expect tests, the method which is traditionally employed uses large stakes testing at the end of a block of instruction. To use testing as a form of effortful retrieval, use multiple tests spaced out periodically throughout a course or training sequence with a relatively low consequence. Using this type of testing makes the act more about retrieval than an exercise in obtaining a grade. Finally, instead of block-style instruction, To produce effortful retrieval with a course design, consider interleaving varying problem types as you review, test, or quiz participants on the covered material. Involving a mixture of problem types inside the design of a course curriculum or training course will ensure an effort is made in the recall of information and thereby strengthen the knowledge, allowing it to pass easier into long-term storage. Now let's do a quick recap of what we have discussed. In summary, this presentation discussed what standard study practices are like currently and what techniques people tend to use. We discussed what effortful retrieval is and how this practice aids in long-term recall. Finally, some simple suggestions were provided on implementing these techniques into your curriculum or training designs. In putting together this presentation, these were the resources I used or consulted. All credit for the work goes to the scientists, doctors, and researchers who gathered this useful information.